Parents are massive reinforcers, probably the best reinforcer there is. And I think one of the best ways to reinforce a kid is just by spending time with them, interacting with them, taking an interest in their interests. I use a lot of humor with kids, and I did with my own daughters too. So a kid who often misbehaves, there's some moment where they aren't. That's when you lean in heavily towards them. I like using absurd humor, saying something out of the blue that doesn't really fit the situation, because almost always a kid will be caught off guard by that and then will riff off of you. So you can spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about the most ridiculous things. Like you might say something out of the blue, completely unexpected. I think we need a new pet in this house. And I think my first choice is going to be a chimpanzee. Well, what do you think of that? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you like chimpanzees? They're a lot of fun. Wait a minute, hold on. They have to wear diapers because I do think they throw poop from time to time, but we can overlook that. Poop on the wall, what's the difference? Who cares about that? It is against a law to have a chimpanzee, so we'd have to do it on the down low. What do you think of this idea? Now, most kids, sometimes they just don't have a great sense of humor, which is an awesome opportunity to help them have a better, but they'll riff off of you. A chimpanzee, that sounds great. He should sleep in my room. I said, well, they're not good with closed doors. I don't think that would work out very well. So, but let's keep talking about this. And so you spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about the most absurd thing possible. The kid thinks it's funny. You think it's funny. It's like you, for no reason whatsoever, have reached out and touched them, right? I didn't have to do this thing with you. I could have made myself a cup of coffee. I could have scrolled on my phone. I could have done 100 different things, but I know you. I love you. I see you. And now that you're behaving in such a fantastic way, or even a neutral way, I'm going to lean in by just paying attention to you and being funny. That's going to reinforce the very behavior that's in front of me right now. So when a kid is acting out, cursing at me, yelling or whatever, I'm not funny with them, right? I'm not going to use absurd humor. I'm going to pull back just a tiny little bit. My presentation is going to shift just a tiny little bit from being the warm, loving dad to being, I'm not happy with what you're doing right now. This is not okay with me. Right? You see a clear shift in those two things. I'm not yelling. I'm not raising my voice. I'm not speaking harshly to them. I'm a great believer that there's never reason for parents to yell at their kids. And I know that sounds kind of nutty when people hear it for the first time, but it is entirely doable. I did it with my own kids. I did it with the kids that I worked with. I do it with every parent that I see today. I ask every parent to commit to me that they're never going to raise their voice with their kids again, because there's never a reason to. Parents yell when they don't get the thing done, when the kid is not complying and they're frustrated. But I can teach you how to get kids to do almost anything that you want them to do. First request, maybe second at the most. So why would you yell? What's there to get mad about? They're doing the thing that you want them to do. And you want them to listen for the non-yelling voice, not the yelling voice, the non-yelling voice. So they take you seriously when you're not yelling at them, and ask them to do something that's important for them to do.
Paul, talking about that non-yelling voice, when we have kids who are having kind of an epic meltdown, whether they're 5 or 14, what I'm hearing from you in this instance is that with those children, we're not necessarily stepping in and doing the whole validating bit from your perspective. No. We're creating that stronger stance, saying I'm here, but we're also not joining them in their chaos.
100%. I completely agree with what you just said. So there are a lot of parenting influencers and a ton of parenting books, and people do see this in different ways. But I feel strongly about this, that when a kid is, the word we use for little kids tends to be tantrum. The word we use for older kids or teenagers is dysregulation. They mean exactly the same thing. I never recommend that a parent stays directly engaged with a kid who's tantruming or becoming dysregulated. But a lot of people will advocate for that. And the reason I don't think it works is I've seen plenty of parents who do this. It's the act of staying engaged that actually keeps the dysregulation in motion, right? So parents and kids will ping off of each other. So a parent will say, I can see you're really frustrated right now, but maybe you can take a few deep breaths. Do you think that would help? Oh, I'm not taking deep breaths. Deep breaths don't work. That's stupid. So it just keeps the kid in an angry state of mind, nor can you help in any way. Nothing you say is going to penetrate that fog. The kid is mad and they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to accept your help. They're just going to be mad. And so what works a lot better is to disengage, is to say something like, look, I can't have a conversation with you when you're yelling at me. So I'm going to give you some space. Then you walk away from them. You turn your back and you walk away. You're not completely ignoring them. Obviously, you're still listening and watching out of the corner of your eye what they're doing to keep them safe. but you refuse to energize that. You refuse to engage with a kid who is just melted down into a puddle. And instead, he's happy to talk to you again once you're calmed down. And you mean it, right? You never re-engage until the kid is fully settled. And for most kids, how long does that take? I don't know, half hour to maybe an hour or two at the very most, but somewhere in that range. And every kid calms down. It's a biological certainty that everybody is going to calm themselves back down again. But the thing they really need is for parents to leave them alone, give them space, let them learn how to regulate their own emotions without you necessarily being the emotional regulator on the scene. That denies kids opportunities to learn emotion regulation skills. We learn by practice. And so that kid will calm themselves down. And eventually they're going to be back on track again. And when they are, that's when parents light back up again. I'm so happy you're back. Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, maybe you'll sit down and unpack the tantrum. Maybe you won't. Not everything that a kid does needs to be processed or unpacked. Some things do. But I will not give you the best of me while you're doing this, which is not the best of you. This is where we take a break from each other and pause and take space. I've said this to some therapists, and sometimes I'll get the response, well, aren't you abandoning your child? And it's like, no, I don't think that's what you're doing at all. You drop them off on a street corner and wave goodbye to them. That's abandonment. Come on, seriously. You're in the same room with them most of the time, or at most you're one room away. You're still there, right? And you're still a loving presence. That's not abandonment. That's just saying, look, I'm going to kind of set the tone for what's happening in front of me. And this is not a crisis. This is not the end of the world. So my presentation is going to be calm. It's going to be matter of fact. I'm going to appear not in any way knocked off course by this tantrum. Because if you parents are distressed and, oh my God, I need to help her, what should I do? That's energizing the negativity right there. So I do believe disengagement is the right way to go. It's exactly what I teach to every parent. It's what I did years ago when I worked in residential treatment programs, kids who would live in these programs because of their behaviors. I tried very hard to never actively be engaged with a kid who is having a tantrum. Didn't do it with my daughters. I have a strong attachment to them and to this day and vice versa. I do not think in any way that gets in the way of your relationship. In fact, I think it actually enhances it, which is I can't talk to you when you're doing this. So it's probably a good idea to calm down.
And Paul, I know you said the exact same thing about arguments with kids. When we go back and forward, it energizes the argument.
Absolutely. I say this to parents too, and at first I think I'm crazy. There's never a reason to argue with a kid or a teenager. An argument by definition is when two people are speaking back and forth, right? So the way you end an argument with a kid is you stop your end of the equation, right? So if somebody stops talking, it's by definition no longer an argument. It's the kid up on a soapbox or monologuing. And so not that you can't talk to kids about things or try to collaborate with them. Of course you can do that. But once it becomes an argument, and everybody knows when they're in an argument, people are interrupting, their voices start to get elevated, kids start to speak in a more harsh way or faster, you know that's an argument. And the reason arguments take place the vast majority of instances in families is because you're telling a kid to do something that they don't want to do, right? Fundamental. You're telling them no. They don't like no. So they're going to keep at you again and again and again, hoping that they can turn that no into a yes, or at the very least level the playing field by making you angry and distressed because you've asked them to do something that they don't want to do. So it's fairly easy to sidestep an argument, I think, which is this: I'm not going to argue with you about this. I've kind of told you what you need to do. I'm not going to ask you again. This is the end of the conversation. And then you get up and you walk away from them. Because when you walk away from somebody, you're clearly signifying this conversation is over. Now, the kid may follow you around the house haranguing you, but you just don't engage. Now you become disengaged again. You just refuse to do it. I won't argue with you. It's perfectly reasonable that I ask you to do your homework. It's up to you to do it. That's your decision to make. But I'm like every parent, I expect you to do your homework and I expect you to turn it in on time. It's not a fight. There's no gray area in this. This is you doing your homework. It's me asking you.